Hi there, thank you for tuning into my show. Today I want to talk to you about wrongful death lawsuits, or wrongful death cases. Um, in Arizona, as in most states, quite honestly, we have a wrongful death statute. So what it is it's a statute. It's a statute, a law that essentially explains who can pursue a wrongful death claim on behalf of somebody who was killed. And it lays out, the statute actually says in it who can pursue the claim. So in Arizona, for example, parents can bring a wrongful death lawsuit on behalf of children, or on behalf of a child who was killed. Children can bring a wrongful death claim on behalf of a parent who was killed. And that pretty much encompasses the whole thing. And spouses, I should say. I almost missed spouses. A husband can bring a wrongful death claim if his wife was killed, or the wife may bring a wrongful death claim if her husband was killed. So what that means, for example, is grandparents can't bring a wrongful death claim when a grandchild is killed. Siblings cannot bring a wrongful death claim when their brother or their sister is killed in an accident. It doesn't mean they haven't suffered a horrific loss. It just means that in Arizona, they're not able to do that. And I think, as far as I know, most states have a statute that deals with wrongful death claims and lays out who can appropriately bring those claims. And so that's an important piece of wrongful death, or an important piece of information when it comes to wrongful death claims. And so, when somebody comes to us after that kind of horrific accident has happened and they've lost a loved one, that's the first thing we have to determine is, who are we speaking with, and what is that person's relationship to the person who was killed in the accident? Because we initially have to determine whether or not the person who wants to hire us can legally bring a claim, a wrongful death claim on behalf of, or to be compensated for the loss of the person who was killed. So that's sort of step one of the things that we have to look at. Step two is we then actually have to look at the ins and outs, for lack of a better way to put it, of the relationship between the person bringing the claim and the person who has been killed. And what I mean by that is this. Certainly if you have a 40-year-old father of two children who's married, and that father is killed in a car accident, his wife can pursue a wrongful death claim, and so can his two children. All three of them can have the same attorney, or they can have different attorneys. Ultimately, it's up to them. I mean, generally, when little children are involved, they just have the same attorney as their mom. But let's take the same scenario and say the 40-year-old father of three who's married has one parent who's still alive. Let's say his mom. His mom also can bring a wrongful death claim, because she lost her son. And so you do see lots of scenarios where mom and the two kids have one attorney, or the spouse and the two kids have one attorney, and the parent who's lost her 40-year-old son has a different attorney representing her. But again, they can all be represented by the same person if that works for everybody. Ultimately, those are decisions that need to be made by the people bringing the claims. Now, each claim is different from a value standpoint, for lack of a better way to put it. When you determine the value in a wrongful death claim, meaning what somebody has to pay, that can be a very difficult process. For starters, because you've got to start with, from a dollar amount, from a dollar value, what is a life worth? I mean, that's impossible to answer, quite honestly. But the reason it's an important piece of any wrongful death claim is because if you end up in a jury trial, that's what a jury's going to have to do. The jury will have to decide what is the dollar value of the deceased's life? Because that's all the jury can give you is money. And so they've got to stick a dollar value on it. And so it's easier to determine dollar value if you have an economic loss. So the two small children who have lost their father, they have an economic loss. So you look at dad who's passed away and what dad did for a living, how he earned money to support his two children, and how much money he made each year, what his profession was, what his job was, what his long-term earning potential in that industry and in that job is. And you can put all those numbers together. And you can actually come up with a dollar value to tie to the loss that the children have, because the kids will no longer have that money to support them within life over the next, let's say, if the kids are 5, over the next 13 years until they turn 18, possibly longer, if you factor in, the years a kid would be in college and potentially supported by their parents. So you can put a dollar value on that economic loss. And you can do the same, the wife can do the same, because she's lost her husband, who would get up every day and go to work and would bring home a certain amount of money. And she not only loses what he's bringing home today, but what would have been bringing home 10 years from now and 20 years from now as well. And that's an important factor in the claim that the spouse and the two minor kids have. Now, the adult parent of the deceased generally, under most circumstances, doesn't have that aspect to their claim. If the 40-year-old son didn't support his, let's say, 65-year-old mother, didn't send her money every month, didn't pay her house payment, there's not an economic loss piece to her claim. So her claim becomes all about loss of her son's love. And again, that's very difficult to put a dollar value to, because certainly an insurance defense attorney will always argue at trial, in my experience, is it doesn't matter how much money the insurance company is forced to pay, it will never bring the deceased back, which is true. And so it will never remedy or solve or be a solution to that loss of love that whoever's making the claim is going to have to go without. And then you look at a lot of miscellaneous factors with the spouse and with the minor children. What was their relationship like? Had dad moved out 9 months prior and just hadn't filed for a divorce, but they weren't living together and they spent very little time together? That's certainly going to impact a claim if it's part of it. With the adult parent, how often did her 40-year-old son see her? Did they see each other on holidays once a year? Did they spend every weekend together? That's going to be an important piece. So you have all these factors that ultimately play into what somebody has to pay, quite honestly, a wrongdoer needs to pay to fairly compensate someone. And it can be very complicated. I know, for example, we've had lots of these cases, unfortunately, where one big problem you run into in any wrongful death claim is there enough insurance coverage to fairly compensate anybody? So if the person who's at fault only has a $15,000 policy or a $25,000 insurance policy or even a $100,000 insurance policy, 9 times out of 10, that's still not enough to fairly compensate everyone. And when I say everyone, this is an important factor. A wrongful death claim is what's known as a derivative claim. So what that means is this. All the claimants, so in our example, we have 4 claimants, 2 minor children, a spouse, and an adult parent who survived the deceased. So we have 4 claimants. All 4 of those claimants can only be compensated out of the single per person portion of an insurance policy. So if the at-fault driver has a $100,000, $300,000 liability policy, what that means is $100,000 is the max any individual who's injured or harmed in the accident can receive. $300,000 is the total amount that insurance policy will pay out to everybody who's injured. So if there are 6 people injured in the accident, they're never paying out more than that, $300,000, and no single individual will get more than $100,000. Well, what a derivative claim means is it means that our 4 claimants don't have the opportunity to get paid out of the $300,000 total. The max they will get is the $100,000 portion of the policy that any single individual can get, and they have to split it between them. So that means the minor children probably have the largest claim and receive the most amount of money. The spouse probably receives the next piece, and the adult parent receives the smallest portion. So just to kind of give some basic parameters, if you took a $100,000 policy under that scenario, the kids would probably receive about $70,000 of it, $30,000 each, or I should say $35,000 each, for $70,000 total to each kid. The spouse would probably only receive about $20,000, and the adult parent who survived your 40-year-old son would probably only get about $10,000, and now your $100,000 is gone. And so you start to look at it and say, oh my goodness, how can a 65-year-old mom who loses her 40-year-old son and brings a wrongful death claim only get $10,000? And it happens, quite honestly, it happens more than I think anybody listening to my show here will ever care to know. How can 2 minor children, let's say 5 years old each, even pretend, how can we even pretend that they're fully compensated for even for the monetary piece that they're not going to have because dad was killed with, by getting $35,000, not to mention the loss of love and affection and having a father to raise them and all these other things. That becomes a big issue in wrongful death claims. They become very difficult to, lots of wrongful death claims become very difficult to actually get fair, complete compensation for the surviving family members who are able to bring a claim under most circumstances. And so, so they're very difficult cases. The reason I've put this show together today is if, God forbid, you ever find yourself in that situation. One, you really ought to find, a good attorney to at least consult with, and get their input. All good attorneys that I know of, even if they take on the claim, will treat you very fairly when it's all said and done from a fee standpoint if you find yourself in a situation where there are limited resources to compensate you and the other family members. But it really tends to work out best if you have the assistance of an attorney. Many times it tends to work out best if everybody has the same attorney. But I can tell you with families, there are lots of different dynamics, unfortunately. And some family members don't like other family members. Some family members, think that now somehow this wrongful death claim is going to produce a whole bunch of money for somebody, and they want to be that somebody, which then can create problems within the family. And so even if everybody has different attorneys, it tends to go more smoothly and tends to get done right if you have the assistance of an attorney. And the attorney will also be able to help look through other potential sources of compensation. Is there a road design issue that maybe puts some liability for this death on a government entity? Is there a guardrail issue? Is there a signage issue? Is there's some, for example, if a driver was drunk, is there a bar or a restaurant or a store that has some liability because of the sale of alcohol, to whoever was involved in the accident. Are there other policies that different family members have that need to pay out as well, whether it's uninsured motorist coverage policies, underinsured motorist coverage policies, potentially umbrella policies? Those are all the things that your attorney should help you sort through so you get compensated to the greatest degree possible in the claim, and that something's not missed. Because unfortunately, insurance companies, if nobody ever makes the claim, they're never going to pay you anything. And all these things are very complicated, and they take, a significant amount of knowledge and, to even know where to look and where to go. So the best advice I can give you, if God forbid you find yourself in this situation, is to at the very least sit down and talk to an attorney who knows what he's doing, who can give you a lot of good input and answer all your questions. Thank you for tuning in, and I will talk to you all next week.